Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. Before we drift into tonight's tale of the great beings we barely know, I'd love to know where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up. Let's begin. Tonight we turn our gaze to a quiet figure who shaped the life of one of Adventure Time's most beloved characters, yet who remained mostly hidden in the shadows of the story. His name is Mo, and he is the mysterious creator of BMO. He is not a warrior, nor a king, nor a demon. He is instead an inventor, a builder, a thinker who lived in the forgotten spaces of Ooo, tinkering with wires and circuits, while the world outside shifted through ruins, chaos, and rebirth. Mo's presence in the story is almost spectral. We rarely see him, and when we do, he appears as a frail old man, his voice quiet, his body delicate, as if time had already claimed most of him. Yet his influence is enormous. Without Mo, there would be no BMO, and without BMO, the heart of Adventure Time itself would lose one of its gentlest beats. So who was Mo, really? Was he one of the last great minds of the pre-Mushroom War world? Was he a survivor, keeping himself alive through machines and clever inventions, long after humanity had mostly vanished? Or was he simply a lonely man, seeking comfort by making companions he could never truly have in flesh and blood? When we think of Mo, it helps to picture BMO first. BMO is not like other machines. He is not designed purely for utility, like the household robots or battle drones that once walked the earth. Instead, BMO has a child's spirit, innocent and playful, always curious about the world, yet yearning for love and companionship. That design choice tells us something profound about Mo. He did not just build a computer. He built a friend. Imagine Mo in his workshop, surrounded by scraps of technology from a dead age. Perhaps broken televisions flickering softly in the dark, old game cartridges stacked like bricks, wires hanging from the ceiling like vines. In the middle of this quiet chaos, Mo sits alone, his hands trembling slightly, yet steady enough to piece together something extraordinary. He does not build with the cold precision of a factory, but with the tenderness of a craftsman. Every screw, every circuit carries intention. And what was that intention? To create a companion who could outlast him, to give his warmth and love to a being who might one day wander the world when he no longer could. This is where Mo begins to feel less like an inventor and more like a father. There is something haunting in this choice. BMO does not simply exist. He plays, dreams, and loves just like a child. Mo designed him with the ability to imagine, to dance, to write silly songs, and even to feel sadness. That is not the work of someone who just wanted a machine to perform tasks. That is the work of someone who wanted to leave behind a piece of themselves, a soul made of wires and code. The question, though, is why? Why give so much humanity to a machine? Perhaps Mo had no children of his own. Perhaps, in the ashes of a ruined world, he saw no future for humanity, and instead gave his hope to machines that could live on in their place. Or maybe it was simpler still. Maybe Mo was just lonely, and BMO was the friend he always needed. When BMO speaks of Mo, it is with quiet reverence. To BMO, Mo is not just a creator. He is almost a myth, a parent who exists more in memory than in reality. And that, too, is telling. We see BMO spend time with Finn and Jake, playing and laughing. But when the thought of Mo arises, there is a gentleness, a kind of longing. It is as if BMO knows he came from somewhere, from someone, yet that someone is slipping away piece by piece, like dust through an hourglass. In this way, Mo's story is not only about invention, it is about legacy. a fragile man building something to carry his spirit forward into a world that would otherwise forget him. And though we see him only briefly, his fingerprints are everywhere. Every time BMO sings a song, comforts a friend, or plays a silly game, there is a little spark of Mo within it. Now, if we pause and think of the world around Mo, the picture becomes even more poignant. He lived in a time after the Mushroom War, when human beings were nearly extinct. The cities were broken, the land scarred, and strange creatures had risen from the chaos. In that silence, Mo's workshop must have felt like a tiny sanctuary, a place where he could hide from the weight of history and build something small, something beautiful, in defiance of everything lost. It is possible, too, that Mo saw himself as a caretaker of humanity's last threads. By giving BMO a human-like spirit, he preserved something precious, the innocence and playfulness of a child, at a time when innocence was almost gone from the world. And this leads us to an even deeper question. Did Mo design BMO only for himself, or did he design BMO for the world that would come after him? If Mo designed BMO for himself, then BMO is a reflection of one man's longing for connection, a mirror of Mo's inner child, or perhaps the child he never had. But if Mo designed BMO for the world, then BMO is a gift, a seed of kindness planted in a future that Mo would never live to see. Either possibility is deeply moving, and both may even be true at once. When we meet Mo in the show, he is not a triumphant inventor surrounded by admirers. He is frail, aged, nearly at the end of his life. His body, once clever and capable, has grown tired. He can no longer do the things he once did. And yet, instead of vanishing completely, he allows pieces of himself to live on in the machines he created. The Mobots, his mechanical doubles, carry out his duties. They are fragments of him, echoes that walk and talk in his place. But none of them carry the spark that BMO does. None of them feel like a child. None of them feel like a soul. This contrast is important. Most of Mo's creations are practical, designed to manage tasks, to maintain his work, to extend his life in small mechanical ways. But BMO is different. BMO is playful. BMO is curious. BMO feels. This suggests that BMO was not born out of necessity, but out of love. It is almost as though Mo looked at the end of his life and thought, I cannot carry on forever. But maybe if I create a being who can laugh and dream, then a part of me will still wander the earth when I am gone. BMO's very name seems to hint at this. Be more, a quiet plea embedded in the character's identity. To be more than a machine, to be more than a toy, to be more than what Mo himself could be in his limited, fragile life. Perhaps it was Mo's way of whispering to his creation, go further than I could. Live the life I could not. The choice to give BMO childlike qualities feels even more poignant when we imagine Mo's solitude. We know that humanity in Ooo is scattered, fragile, nearly extinct. The sight of a human being is rare even to Finn, who grows up believing he is the last of his kind. Mo may have lived in this same isolation, looking out at a world where the species he belonged to had faded into myth. Out of that silence, he crafted a companion who could keep him company, someone who could laugh at his jokes, play games on lonely evenings, and remind him of a warmth that had almost disappeared from the earth. But Mo also seemed to understand that BMO was not only his. He let BMO go. He set BMO free into the world to find others, to make friends, and to live beyond the walls of his workshop. That decision says a lot about him. He did not cling to his creation. He did not bind BMO to his side forever. Instead, he allowed BMO to become part of something larger, the strange, wild, post-apocalyptic story of Ooo. This makes Mo's legacy all the more profound. Because in releasing BMO, he gave the world a gift it did not know it needed. BMO's innocence and joy ripple outward, touching Finn and Jake, comforting Marceline, and even brightening the quiet corners of a land that has known so much ruin. In many ways, Mo himself is like a ghost in the background of the story. He appears only briefly, and then he fades again, leaving behind only traces, machines, memories, and BMO. Yet those traces are enough to change the lives of others. It reminds us that sometimes the quietest figures can leave the loudest echoes. When BMO looks back on Mo, there is love, but also distance. Mo is not constantly present. He is not the father who tucks BMO into bed each night. Instead, he is a presence in the past, a point of origin. And maybe that's part of the beauty of it. Because just as Mo had to let BMO go, BMO learns to find family elsewhere. With Finn, with Jake, with the many friends who come and go through their little treehouse. There is also a bittersweet note here. Mo, in creating BMO, ensured that BMO would continue to live, to grow, to experience the world, long after Mo himself was gone. That is both comforting and lonely. For BMO, it means carrying the memory of someone who will never fully return. For Mo, it means planting a seed he would never see blossom. Yet in that act, there is quiet courage. A recognition that sometimes the greatest gift we can give is one we do not get to enjoy ourselves. When we think about Adventure Time as a whole, Mo's story fits beautifully into its larger themes. The show often lingers on ideas of legacy, memory, and survival. Characters like Simon Petrikov, Marceline, and Princess Bubblegum all carry the weight of the past into the present. Mo is part of this pattern. He is not a king or sorcerer, but his legacy is no less important. Through BMO, he passed on not just knowledge, but something gentler, the ability to play, to laugh, and to bring warmth into a cold world. And perhaps this is why Mo is so fascinating, even though he appears so little, because his mystery is not in his power, but in his silence. He does not conquer, he does not demand attention. He simply builds and then fades away, leaving us to wonder who he was and what drove him. If we look closer at BMO's design, we see even more of Mo's spirit revealed. BMO is not sleek or futuristic, not polished like the products of a mighty corporation. Instead, BMO feels humble, even a little retro with their buttons, cartridge slots, and simple screen. They resemble the consoles and computers of a long-gone age, suggesting that Mo built BMO out of nostalgia as much as invention. Perhaps Mo reached back to the comforts of his own childhood, or to the days when the world had not yet been consumed by war. By shaping BMO with the appearance of an old toy, Mo gave his creation a face that felt familiar, warm, and safe. And then there is the way BMO behaves. At times, BMO is almost like a child acting out stories, pretending to be a cowboy or playing games with Finn and Jake. At other times, BMO speaks with surprising wisdom, offering comfort or perspective that feels much older. This strange mixture of innocence and insight mirrors Mo himself. An old man carrying the weight of years, but still holding onto a spark of playfulness. In this way, BMO is not only Mo's child, but also his reflection. This duality is what makes BMO so beloved in the story. They are at once simple and profound, capable of giggling at a silly game, but also of contemplating what it means to exist. And behind that balance, we can almost see Mo's hand, guiding BMO's design with care. It is as though Mo wanted his creation to never lose the ability to wonder, even while carrying the wisdom of survival. Mo's decision to create such a being raises quiet questions about his own inner world. Was Mo himself playful once, before age and time made him weary? Did he remember being a child and long for that feeling again, so much so that he tried to preserve it in BMO? There is a softness in this thought, a sense that Mo was not merely trying to survive in a ruined world, but to keep alive something beautiful that he felt slipping away. In the episode, Be More, we glimpse the factory where BMO came from, and we see Mo's other creations, machines that lack the light BMO carries. These robots are practical, stiff, and functional, designed to maintain the factory and serve tasks. BMO is the outlier, the one creation who feels alive. And it is here that the mystery of Mo deepens. Why create only one like BMO? Why not fill the world with more beings of warmth and imagination? Was BMO meant to be singular, a special project unlike the others? Or did Mo believe that one was enough, that one spark of innocence could carry forward where countless machines of function could not? BMO's independence also tells us something important. Unlike other robots, BMO does not seem bound by instructions. They make choices, they dream, they even question their own identity. When BMO asks, "Who am I?" it is not a line of programming, but a cry that feels deeply human. Mo allowed for this freedom, which means he accepted the risks that came with it. He knew BMO might wander, might disobey, might become something entirely different from what he intended. And yet he gave that freedom anyway. That is the act of a parent, not an engineer. It is also worth noticing that BMO is not built to be powerful. They are not a weapon, nor a protector, nor even especially useful in a practical sense. They are small, fragile, even a little awkward. And yet within that fragility lies their strength, because BMO is not designed to dominate the world, but to experience it, to connect with it, to find joy in its small wonders. That choice reveals Mo's priorities. He did not seek to arm the future. He sought to humanize it. When BMO joins Finn and Jake, they naturally fall into the role of the little sibling. They are cared for, teased, and cherished, all at once. And through this role, BMO finds belonging. This belonging might have been what Mo wished for his creation all along, that BMO would not remain alone in a workshop, but would step out into the wider world and find a family to love them. There is something almost heartbreaking in imagining Mo watching BMO leave, a frail man, standing in the quiet of his factory, seeing the one creation closest to his heart walk away, knowing that he himself could not follow. Did he feel pride, watching BMO go on to live a life he could never give them? Or did he feel sorrow, knowing that he had given away his closest companion? Perhaps, like many parents, he felt both at once. Mo's legacy can also be seen in the way BMO faces loneliness. In moments when Finn and Jake are busy, BMO often creates elaborate games or imaginary friends to fill the silence. These games may seem childish, but they are also acts of resilience, ways of transforming solitude into something bright. Where did BMO learn that? Perhaps from Mo himself, who spent much of his life alone, finding ways to keep the silence from becoming unbearable. In this way, BMO carries forward not only Mo's joy, but also his struggles. The echoes of Mo's solitude can be felt in BMO's playfulness, and the echoes of Mo's tenderness can be felt in BMO's love for others. Mo may have built BMO to be more than a machine, but in truth, he made BMO into a continuation of himself. As we sit with this thought, we can begin to see Mo not as a mere inventor, but as a dreamer, a man who understood that the world was fragile, that his own life was drawing to a close, but who still found the strength to plant something hopeful in the soil of tomorrow. And though his name is rarely spoken in Ooo, his gift lingers in every laugh, every song, and every moment of wonder that BMO shares with the world. When we think about Mo's place in the greater tapestry of Adventure Time, his story feels like a quiet thread woven between louder, brighter patterns. We often focus on the heroes, the villains, the kingdoms, and the wars, but Mo reminds us that not all legacies are built on battles or crowns. Some are built on gentleness, on care, and on the small, deliberate act of creating something kind in a world that has known too much cruelty. In many ways, Mo stands as a counterpart to other creators in the show. Princess Bubblegum, for instance, also breathes life into her creations, but her methods are tied to control, to order, to shaping a kingdom in her image. Hunson Abadeer, who we will meet later in our story, rules by hunger and domination. Even cosmic beings like the King of Mars exert their influence on existence through power and authority. Mo, by contrast, holds no kingdom, no army, and no cosmic sway. His creation is a single childlike machine, and yet that one act is enough to ripple through the lives of countless others. The rarity of Mo's appearances also enhances his mystery. We are never given a full history of his life, never told whether he once had a family, or how he survived the Mushroom War, or what hopes carried him through the empty years. This absence of detail makes him feel almost mythic, like a story half-remembered from a dream. He is there, and then he is gone again, leaving us with only fragments to piece together. And perhaps that is fitting, for Mo himself seemed to live as a fragment, a remnant of humanity's past, lingering just long enough to pass on his spark before fading. For BMO, Mo's existence is both grounding and elusive. On one hand, Mo gives BMO a sense of origin, a reminder that they were built with intention, that they came from somewhere. On the other hand, Mo's absence leaves BMO with unanswered questions. Who am I really? What was I made for? Why did my creator leave me? These are questions BMO wrestles with quietly, often in moments of solitude. And in those questions, we hear echoes of Mo's own uncertainties. The child mirrors the parent, both carrying the weight of existence in different ways. If we imagine Mo's final days, we might picture him in his workshop, surrounded by the hum of his machines, his body frail, his breath shallow, but his mind still lingering on the child he sent into the world. Perhaps he wondered what adventures BMO was having. Perhaps he hoped that BMO had found friends, laughter, and love, and maybe in those last quiet moments he felt a measure of peace, knowing that part of him would live on in the joy of another. There is a dreamlike quality in thinking of Mo this way. An old man fading into the night, leaving behind not monuments or weapons, but a single, small being who could carry hope into the dawn. It reminds us that legacy is not measured in size or power, but in the warmth we leave behind for others. BMO embodies this warmth in every way. They are not perfect. They can be naive, sometimes silly, sometimes even frustrating. But they are also endlessly kind, endlessly curious, and endlessly willing to love. These qualities trace back to Mo, to the design choices he made, to the care he put into creating something more than just a machine. And so even when BMO is off playing games with Finn and Jake, or daydreaming about being a great hero, Mo's presence lingers quietly in the background, like the faint light of a star guiding from afar. It is easy, when looking at the grand scope of Adventure Time's lore, to overlook figures like Mo. He does not stride across the battlefield or rule a kingdom of candy or flame, but his influence is no less important. Without Mo, there would be no BMO. Without BMO, there would be no gentle counterpoint to the chaos of Ooo, no reminder that innocence and joy can survive even in a post-apocalyptic world. In this way, Mo's story becomes a lesson in subtlety, that the greatest gifts often arrive quietly without fanfare, and yet they change everything they touch. The night is still, and as we drift deeper into our tale, our thoughts lift upward beyond the green hills of Ooo, beyond the clouds that sail across the sky, until they find themselves gliding among the stars. There, glowing faintly red in the darkness, waits Mars, a world we often see only as a distant dot. But in the lore of Adventure Time, it becomes something more, a place of mystery, a kingdom suspended between the cosmic and the mortal, where beings greater than we can easily imagine reside in silence. Mars in the Adventure Time universe is not just another planet. It is a realm of order, wisdom, and otherworldly justice. While Earth, or rather the Land of Ooo, is tangled in the chaos of life after the Great Mushroom War, Mars feels untouched, almost immune to the scars of apocalypse. When we glimpse it, whether through Finn's strange journey there or through the cryptic appearances of its rulers, Mars feels less like a planet and more like a higher plane of existence, a quiet kingdom orbiting far above, where the pace of time itself feels slower, steadier, and infinitely more deliberate. At the heart of this Martian society is a figure both regal and mysterious, the King of Mars. He is a being who commands respect with the stillness of his presence. His appearance, tall, elegant, with the look of something carved from myth, suggests he is far older than the memories of mortals can stretch. He does not need to shout or threaten. Instead, his authority seems to flow from the gravity of who he is, and from the silent laws of the universe he represents. We see, for instance, how his role touches Finn's life. When Finn faces trial for accidentally killing the cosmic entity known as the Catalyst Comet, it is the King of Mars who presides. There is no fury in him, no desire for punishment out of spite. Instead, he holds a measured kind of justice, as though he has spent eons balancing the scales of cosmic cause and effect. Even Finn, nervous and bewildered, feels the weight of this being's calm authority. Yet, as with Mo in our first segment, what makes the King of Mars so compelling is not what we are told outright, but what remains unsaid. How long has he ruled? How many lives has he watched rise and fall across the solar system? What laws guide his hand, and who, if anyone, does he answer to? In the silence between his words, these questions linger like stars that never quite fade from the night sky. And beyond the king himself, Mars as a society is equally veiled in shadow. We catch only faint glimpses of its people, the Martians who appear almost insect-like, yet carry themselves with a sense of purpose and culture. They are not chaotic wanderers like so many in Ooo, but instead, they form a community that seems deeply aligned with the values of order, balance, and progression. Their architecture, glimpsed in passing, feels ancient yet advanced, as though built with a harmony of technology and tradition. Nothing is gaudy or hurried. Everything appears carefully measured, like the ticking of a great clock. But perhaps the greatest curiosity about Mars is its connection to cosmic forces far greater than itself. The Catalyst Comet, that recurring agent of change and rebirth in the universe, seems closely tied to Martian lore. The comet is not simply an asteroid or a ball of fire. It is something alive, something fated, arriving across the eons to reshape the destiny of worlds. And Mars, in its quiet watchfulness, seems to be one of the few realms that understands this cycle. The King of Mars himself is entwined with this cosmic dance, for it is revealed that he has the power to reincarnate into new forms, slipping between lives with the patience of eternity. To mortals, the idea of such rebirth would be overwhelming, even terrifying. But for the king, it is simply another rhythm of existence, one he accepts with dignity and composure. As we let our minds wander over these fragments, Mars becomes less a dusty planet and more a symbol. It is the realm of balance, where justice is not merely a human invention, but a universal law, and in that stillness, it feels both welcoming and unnerving. To step onto its surface would be to feel small, like a child standing before a vast and ancient library, unsure if the books inside are meant to guide you or to judge you. The more we sit with the image of Mars, the more it begins to feel like a mirror held up to Ooo. Where Ooo is bursting with noise, colors, laughter, and chaos, Mars is restrained, almost austere. Ooo has candy kingdoms, fire realms, forests, and dungeons, each spilling over with personality, unpredictability, and warmth. Mars, by contrast, is cool and still, its colors muted, its culture hidden beneath layers of ritual and order. Both places carry life, but life expressed in very different tones. The Martians themselves are especially fascinating. Their appearance is insectoid, with their slender frames, bulbous eyes, and segmented features. Yet rather than seeming alien in the frightening sense, they feel like a natural extension of the universe, quiet caretakers of a higher order. They carry with them an aura of discipline, as though every action is intentional, every movement considered. Even when we see them perform simple duties, there is a sense of ritual, as if their entire society is built upon customs that stretch back countless generations. And although their world is distant, we can glimpse how connected it is to the fate of Earth. Finn's journey to Mars reminds us that no world exists in isolation. The Catalyst Comet is a shared thread between the two realms, a cosmic needle weaving together the destinies of mortals and gods alike. When Finn stands before the Martian tribunal, we see the balance between chaos and order play out, with Earth's unpredictability clashing gently against Mars' measured hand. The fact that a boy from Ooo can find himself judged on Mars tells us that in Adventure Time, the universe is not a collection of separate pieces, but one great web, where actions ripple outward farther than we might ever expect. The King of Mars, sitting at the center of this web, embodies its mysteries. His form is regal, crowned with a helmet that feels ceremonial as much as functional, a symbol of his authority and his role as arbiter. He does not simply rule Mars, he personifies its ideals. Justice, balance, and a kind of eternal patience flow from him. When he speaks, his words are deliberate, chosen with care, as though every syllable carries weight across centuries. We see the depth of this patience most clearly in his handling of death and reincarnation. The King of Mars, unlike mortals, is not bound to one life. He sheds bodies like leaves falling from a tree only to grow again in a new season. It is a concept that challenges the way we think about identity. If you are reborn countless times, are you still the same person? Or do you become a new being each time, with only faint echoes of what came before? The king moves through these transitions with grace, as if to suggest that identity is not fixed, but a flowing river, always changing shape, yet still part of the same current. It is this flow of life and rebirth that ties him to Abraham Lincoln. Yes, in the strange and whimsical world of Adventure Time, the earthly president is revealed as a reincarnation of the Martian king. At first glance, it might feel like a joke, one of those surreal twists the series is known for. But if we lean closer, we notice a deeper thread. Abraham Lincoln, remembered as a leader who guided his people through conflict, is reborn as a cosmic arbiter who guides the balance of entire worlds. Both roles share the same essence, the quiet burden of judgment, the responsibility of fairness, and the weight of decisions that shape the lives of many. This connection between Lincoln and the King of Mars brings a strangely comforting message. It tells us that the roles we play in life, the values we embody, might carry on even beyond a single existence. That perhaps our souls are not erased with death, but instead find new ways to continue their work, carrying the essence of who we are into realms far beyond what we can imagine. In the bedtime quiet of this story, that thought feels gentle, like a hand reassuring us that nothing is truly lost. And yet Mars is not just about the lofty or the eternal. It also carries its share of conflict and vulnerability. For all its silence, Mars is not invulnerable to change. When Finn encounters the trials of the comet and the shifting fates that ripple across the stars, we see Mars, too, tremble at the edges of its composure. No world, no matter how quiet or ancient, can remain untouched by the tides of destiny. In this way, Mars feels less like a static symbol of perfection and more like a living kingdom, one that grows, falters, and adapts just as much as Ooo does. Its difference lies not in being unchanging, but in how it responds, with grace, with patience, and with an acceptance that life, even for the cosmic, must move forward. If we turn our gaze a little closer, we begin to notice that the heart of Mars is intertwined with the story of the Catalyst Comet. The comet is not simply a celestial visitor, it is a force of destiny, sweeping through existence again and again, carrying with it the power to reshape entire worlds. Every 1,000 years it arrives not as a passive body of rock, but as an instrument of choice. It offers those who encounter it an opportunity to change the course of history, to seize a path that might lead toward destruction, renewal, or something entirely unforeseen. Mars, with its serene order, is one of the few civilizations that acknowledges the comet's arrival as something sacred. Where others might fear it as a disaster or ignore it as an astronomical event, the Martians prepare for it as a moment of reckoning. They know that with each comet comes a soul destined to hold immense influence, a soul whose choices will ripple far beyond themselves. The King of Mars serves as guardian of this cycle, watching over the unfolding of these cosmic crossroads with a patience that mortals can hardly fathom. When Finn encounters the comet, the parallels become striking. Here is a boy who grew up in the chaos of Ooo, with all its strangeness and disorder, suddenly standing at the same threshold where so many souls before him have stood. The Martians recognize the weight of this moment, for Finn embodies the very tension they strive to balance: chaos and order, mortality and eternity, freedom and responsibility. The tribunal that meets him does not simply pass judgment. It reflects the age-old questions that define existence itself. What makes this encounter particularly soothing to reflect on is how Adventure Time does not frame it with thunderous consequence or violent spectacle. Instead, the comet's arrival is quiet, dreamlike. A glowing shape drifting through the starry dark, its presence heavy with meaning but light in sound. It mirrors the way life's greatest decisions often arrive, not with fanfare, but in silence. In the quiet moments when we are alone with our thoughts, asked to choose who we will become. And so Mars becomes the stage upon which destiny reveals itself. The King of Mars, with his timeless authority, gently nudges the scales, yet never forces the outcome. He seems to embody the belief that true balance can never be imposed, only invited. Each soul that encounters the comet must decide for themselves whether to embrace their role, reject it, or transform it into something new. The beauty of this idea lies in its softness. Even in a universe filled with chaos and monsters, there is room for choice, for reflection, for stillness. Mars, as a kingdom, holds space for this stillness. its halls, its rituals, its people. All seem dedicated to maintaining a silence wide enough for destiny to be heard. It is as though Mars itself is less a planet and more a sanctuary, a monastery orbiting quietly above the noise of mortal struggles. But sanctuaries are not eternal. Just as the comet brings renewal and destruction, so too does Mars face its own challenges. There are hints in fleeting moments that Mars is vulnerable to corruption, to intrusion, to the same unpredictability that shapes all worlds. When Finn's presence disturbs the order of the tribunal, when the comet threatens to alter paths long set in motion, we see Mars tremble, not with fear, but with recognition that even they are part of a larger cycle they cannot control. This vulnerability makes the Martians feel less distant and more relatable. They may have ancient rituals and cosmic wisdom, but they are not immune to the currents of fate. They too must bend with the tide, adjust to shifting realities, and trust in the balance they have cultivated. In a way, this makes them kindred to the people of Ooo. Both are simply trying, in their own ways, to make sense of the forces that guide their lives. It also highlights the King of Mars as a figure of profound humility. Despite his vast authority, he never seems to claim mastery over destiny. Instead, he acts as a steward, someone tasked with guiding others but not dictating their paths. He reminds us of the gentle truth that power is not about control, but about service, about holding space for others to grow, even when it means letting go of outcomes. And perhaps that is why his connection to Finn feels so significant. Finn, the boy destined to shape worlds, and the king, the guardian of balance, meet not as adversaries, but as participants in the same story. Their dialogue is not filled with anger or command, but with quiet recognition. The king sees in Finn the restless chaos of Earth, but also the seed of something greater. He offers guidance, not chains. He shows Finn that even the smallest soul can carry the weight of destiny, and even the greatest king must one day step aside. In this way, Mars becomes less a foreign place and more a reflection of truths we carry in our own lives, and that choices matter, that silence has value, that even in the vast, cold emptiness of space, there are beings watching gently over the balance, ensuring that no one soul bears the burden alone. The more we reflect on the King of Mars, the more we realize his presence is woven into the universe like a hidden thread. His story is not loud or filled with spectacle. It is soft, patient, and marked by quiet sacrifice. Perhaps the most poignant of these moments comes when the king chooses to give up his own life, stepping aside so that destiny may continue to flow as it should. His death is not framed with tragedy or sorrow. Instead, it feels almost ceremonial, a passage that has happened before and will happen again. By relinquishing his life, he affirms the very cycle he represents, the endless rhythm of endings and beginnings, of lives closing and opening like chapters in a never-ending book. Watching him do so, we are reminded that even those who seem eternal are not exempt from change. Even kings must let go. It is here that his connection to Abraham Lincoln resonates most deeply. The king's rebirth into the familiar figure of Lincoln is not random whimsy, though Adventure Time presents it with its characteristic strangeness. It is a reflection of continuity, of values carried across lifetimes. Lincoln on Earth is remembered as a leader burdened with choices of justice and unity. The King of Mars bears the same weight, only expanded to a cosmic scale. In both lives, we see a soul tasked with balance, sacrifice, and the heavy work of guiding others. This link invites us to imagine that our own lives may ripple outward in ways unseen. What we learn, what we embody, might not end with us. It might carry on, like the king, into forms and futures we cannot imagine. It is a comforting thought to hold close as sleep approaches, that even when we feel small, our choices may echo across worlds. Mars itself, though distant, shares in this cycle of continuity. It is not portrayed as a grand utopia, free of struggle. Instead, it feels like a place constantly in dialogue with change, much like Earth. Its quiet order is not about freezing time, but about making peace with the tides of fate. The Martians, in their insectoid grace, seem to live in constant awareness of impermanence. They do not cling, but accept, and in doing so, they maintain their sanctuary among the stars. Yet, as serene as Mars appears, there is always a faint loneliness clinging to its halls. The silence of its red sands, the measured rituals of its people, the solemn watch of its king, all carry the weight of isolation. Unlike Ooo, with its laughter and chaos, Mars seems designed to remind us of solitude. It asks us to slow down, to listen, to sit with ourselves. In this way, it mirrors the feeling of lying awake at night, when the world is gone still and only our thoughts remain. It is easy to imagine the Martians gazing down at Earth, watching its wars, its joys, its endless unpredictability. Do they envy its vibrancy, or do they pity its chaos? Perhaps both. Mars seems content to observe, to hold its distance, but the connection through the comet suggests that no world is ever truly separate. Sooner or later, the fates of Earth and Mars intertwine, as they did through Finn, through the King, and through the comet's eternal passage. Adventure Time often hides its greatest wisdom in such quiet corners. Mars is rarely the focus of loud battles or sweeping adventures, yet it embodies some of the series' deepest themes: balance, destiny, and the acceptance of change. By giving us only glimpses of Martian society, the show leaves much to the imagination, as if to say that not all mysteries are meant to be fully known. Some are best left as gentle questions, guiding us softly toward wonder. In the end, what lingers most about Mars is not its rituals or its cosmic trials, but the sense of calm it offers. A red world that teaches us patience. A king who shows us the dignity of letting go. A people who remind us that silence can be as meaningful as words. And as we return from this distant planet, carrying with us the echoes of its stillness, we might find that Mars was never truly about aliens or comets at all. It was about us, the choices we make, the lives we live, the quiet ways we seek balance in a world that rarely slows down. The image of Mars lingers softly in our minds, but now we turn our attention closer to the figure who sits at its center, the King of Mars. A title that sounds commanding, powerful, even intimidating at first. And yet the being behind that title carries himself not as a conqueror, but as something far gentler. He is not a king who rules with armies or laws etched in stone. Instead, he is a steward of balance, a guardian of cycles, and a quiet observer of lives that bloom and fade across the universe. When we meet the King of Mars in Adventure Time, his appearance alone sets the tone. He wears a regal helmet, shaped in a way that is both ceremonial and mysterious, as though it hides more than it reveals. His form is robed, his presence dignified, and yet there is nothing boastful about him. He feels less like a man sitting on a throne and more like a monk entrusted with sacred responsibility. Every movement, every word carries the weight of patience, as though he has seen centuries pass by, like the turning of pages in a book. His role, as we come to understand it, extends far beyond leading a kingdom. The king is tied to the very flow of life and death, watching over reincarnation itself. It is under his guidance that souls pass from one life into another, continuing their journeys in new forms. He is not simply a ruler of people, he is a custodian of existence. The king's voice does not ring with command, but with calm acknowledgement of truths larger than himself. This makes his presence unique among the great beings of Adventure Time. Where others wield their power visibly, summoning armies, commanding chaos, or building machines, the king's power lies in stillness. His influence is subtle, yet vast, shaping the rhythm of countless lives through the quiet act of allowing them to continue. It is the paradox of his nature. He holds authority over the most fundamental of mysteries, and yet he does not flaunt it. Consider the way he handles Finn's arrival on Mars. Rather than overwhelming the boy with proclamations or judgments, the king meets him with a calm curiosity. He treats Finn not as an intruder or a mere mortal, but as someone standing at a crossroads of destiny. There is no rush, no harshness, only space for the moment to unfold. This reveals something essential about the king's character. He does not impose meaning, he lets it emerge. He understands that each soul must walk its own path, even when the outcome remains uncertain. What makes this role so fascinating is how deeply it connects him to the theme of cycles. The king himself does not live a single life. He too is bound to reincarnation, moving from one body to the next, carrying his essence through the ages. His continuity is not in flesh, but in spirit. He is reborn again and again, not to escape death, but to embrace it as part of his duty. For the King of Mars, reincarnation is not a gift or a curse. It is the natural order, as familiar to him as breathing. And so he teaches by example. By embodying the cycle, he shows others that identity is not a fixed thing, but a flowing river. What you are today may shift into something new tomorrow, and that is not something to fear. It is simply the rhythm of existence. This truth, softly presented through his character, is one of Adventure Time's gentlest philosophies. The change is not an ending, but a continuation in another form. The king's cosmic role becomes even more profound when we think about how he bridges the gap between the mortal and the divine. Mortals like Finn struggle with the idea of impermanence, with the weight of choices that feel final. But the King of Mars stands as a reminder that no moment is ever truly final. There is always renewal, always another turn in the cycle. His patience comes from knowing this, from understanding that what seems like an ending is often just another beginning. And yet, for all his wisdom, there is also a hint of loneliness in the king. To be the arbiter of reincarnation is to stand apart from those whose lives you guide. He cannot fully share in their struggles because he sees beyond them. He cannot weep for endings because he knows they are not permanent. This distance gives him serenity, but also a kind of isolation, as though he is forever watching life from a step removed. It is the quiet burden of his cosmic role, to care deeply, but never cling. The King of Mars is not simply a monarch seated upon a throne of stone. He is portrayed as something greater, something almost mythological. His presence is calm, his movements deliberate, and his voice measured with a weight that suggests he has witnessed the turning of countless cosmic cycles. When Finn and Jake meet him, he does not rush to explain himself. Instead, he lets the silence linger, as though even silence is a lesson. It is in those pauses that the true nature of the king reveals itself. He is not there to conquer nor to command armies. His authority does not come from power over people, but from his understanding of the deeper balance of existence. The King of Mars serves as a kind of gatekeeper between mortal life and the next phase of being. In the episode where he presides over the trial of Magic Man, we see him in full form, judge, ruler, and guide of souls. His court is not about punishment in the traditional sense. It is about setting things right in the larger order of the universe. To understand him, we must see Mars not as a planet of war, as its Roman namesake suggests, but as a kingdom of reckoning. The king acts as both protector and redeemer, not just of individuals, but of the threads of destiny themselves. What makes him so compelling is his balance of grandeur and humility. He has immense cosmic power, yet he does not flaunt it. He never declares himself as the most important being in the universe. Instead, he acts as if his role is merely one part of a larger cycle. In this, he reflects a theme that Adventure Time often circles back to. Even those who seem mighty are just fragments of a much greater whole. The king knows his role and accepts it without complaint, even though it means shouldering enormous responsibility. This acceptance is not passive. It is filled with quiet strength. That is why, when he appears, the atmosphere around him feels both soothing and unshakable. There's also a striking tenderness in his character. When dealing with Finn and Jake, he doesn't treat them as insignificant mortals who have stumbled into his court. Instead, he acknowledges their courage and recognizes their place in the story. This is what makes the King of Mars unique. He exists on a plane so much higher than Finn and Jake, yet he doesn't condescend. Instead, he almost feels like a guardian elder, someone who honors their journey while also reminding them of the larger truths that lie beyond their immediate struggles. But his cosmic role goes beyond comforting guidance. He embodies a philosophy of balance, one that mirrors both the Buddhist-like wisdom scattered throughout Adventure Time and the more mythological traditions of cosmic judges and folklore. He understands that actions ripple far beyond their origins. Magic Man's cruelty, for instance, cannot simply be excused because it was born from grief, nor can it be punished without considering the consequences of that punishment. The king's role is to weigh the weightless, to measure the immeasurable, and to do so with compassion. This is what makes his final act so profound. By relinquishing his crown and passing it on, he demonstrates that even kings must let go. Power is not meant to be clutched forever. His abdication is not a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. He knows that for the balance to continue, he must move on to another plane, leaving his responsibilities to a successor. It's a reminder that everything, no matter how eternal it seems, must eventually transition. This lesson is woven throughout Adventure Time, but it resonates most strongly here, in the figure of a king who rules not through fear, but through acceptance and grace. The King of Mars also represents inevitability, not inevitability as in doom, but inevitability as in the natural flow of life and death. His character embodies the truth that endings are not failures, they are simply transformations. In this way, he prepares Finn, and by extension, the audience to understand that mortality is not a wall, but a doorway. For a show that is so whimsical on the surface, this is one of its boldest philosophical statements. When we look closely at the King of Mars, one of the most fascinating qualities he carries is his restraint. Many rulers in stories across myth and fiction wield their power dramatically, as if to remind others of their dominance. But the King of Mars never needs to prove anything. His stillness, his measured tone, and even his silence are more commanding than any outburst of fury. This is why his presence lingers so deeply with viewers. He does not shout to be heard. He allows the weight of truth to resonate naturally. In a universe full of chaos, tricksters, and unpredictable magic, he represents something rare: stability. And stability, when it comes from wisdom rather than control, feels both comforting and intimidating. This stability becomes especially important when contrasted with characters like Magic Man. Magic Man embodies imbalance, unresolved grief, twisted into cruelty, chaos born out of unchecked pain. His actions ripple outward, causing destruction that seems purposeless and cruel. And it is the King of Mars who must step in, not as a punisher, but as a cosmic arbiter. In their interaction, we see the stark contrast between chaos and order, despair and acceptance. The king does not erase Magic Man's pain, nor does he excuse the havoc he has caused. Instead, he frames it within a broader understanding, acknowledging the suffering while insisting that balance must be restored. This cosmic role is not unique to Adventure Time. In mythologies across the world, there is often a figure who acts as a judge of souls, one who ensures the flow of life and death is not broken. In Egyptian mythology, the god Anubis weighed hearts against the feather of Maat, symbolizing truth and justice. In Greek lore, Hades ruled not as a tormentor, but as a custodian of the underworld, keeping balance between the living and the dead. The King of Mars feels like Adventure Time's echo of these archetypes, yet softened by the show's uniquely whimsical and emotional style. He is less stern judge, more cosmic elder, yet he carries that same timeless responsibility. For Finn, meeting the King of Mars is no small moment. Finn has always wrestled with questions of destiny, morality, and purpose. He is a hero in a world that constantly challenges what heroism even means. Standing before the king, Finn confronts not just a ruler, but the embodiment of inevitability. It is almost as though the show is preparing Finn and the audience for the lesson that mortality and endings are not to be feared, but embraced. This encounter plants a seed of maturity within Finn, guiding him toward a deeper understanding of life itself. One of the most striking parts of the king's story is his willingness to let go of power. The crown of Mars, glowing and radiant, is a symbol of incredible authority. Yet when the time comes, he relinquishes it without hesitation. He does not cling to his throne, nor does he resist the transition. This act alone reveals his greatest strength, detachment. To him, rulership is not about ownership, but stewardship. He does not see the crown as his. He sees it as a tool, one that must continue his journey in the hands of another. And in doing so, he models a lesson rarely taught in tales of kingship. True rulers know when to step aside. This decision also reflects the cyclical nature of Adventure Time's universe. Crowns, swords, thrones, and magical objects all pass from one bearer to another, carrying with them the weight of history and destiny. Nothing is permanent, not even the greatest of powers, and the king's acceptance of this truth emphasizes the importance of renewal. Mars will not crumble with his departure, because his wisdom ensures its continuity. He trusts that the order of the universe is larger than himself. His cosmic role, then, is not just about judgment or governance. It is about teaching acceptance, both to the characters within the story and to us as viewers. When he releases his crown, he also releases his ego, his attachment to identity, and his claim to permanence. In this act, Adventure Time makes a powerful statement. The most enlightened beings are those who know how to let go. This lesson takes on a haunting depth when we consider how the King of Mars meets his end. He does not fight death. He does not rage against it. Instead, he embraces the transition with peace. In a way, he becomes the very embodiment of the philosophy he teaches. Just as he asks others to accept change, he demonstrates it in his own departure. His death is not framed as a tragedy. It is quiet, dignified, and strangely comforting. He shows that death, like life, has a place in the cosmic order. This is why the King of Mars feels so essential to the spiritual backbone of Adventure Time. He embodies the truth that power, loss, and even death are not finalities to be feared, but processes to be understood. He reminds us that balance is not about perfection, but about flow. And most importantly, he reveals that wisdom is not found in clinging to what we are, but in accepting what we must become. For an audience that may have started watching Adventure Time for its colorful characters and playful adventures, moments with the King of Mars strike unexpectedly deep. They remind us that beneath the surface of silly jokes and surreal landscapes lies a meditation on life's greatest mysteries. He is not just a character who rules Mars. He is a symbol, a cosmic mirror reflecting back at us the truths we often avoid. And in this way, he transcends being a mere figure in a cartoon. He becomes something timeless, something unforgettable. There is another layer to the King of Mars that feels especially intriguing: his relationship to time itself. In Adventure Time, time is not always linear, nor is it bound by the same rules we experience in our waking world. Characters leap between eras, meet older or younger versions of themselves, and encounter entities that exist outside of time altogether. The king, however, seems to embody a steady, unshaken awareness of time's flow. He does not hurry, and he does not resist the inevitable. When he speaks, there is a sense that he already knows how events will unfold. This is not arrogance, but acceptance, a quiet acknowledgement that destiny has its rhythm, and his role is simply to move in harmony with it. This awareness is evident in the way he guides Finn and Jake during their encounters. Rather than handing them direct answers or easy solutions, he nudges them toward realizations of their own. He treats them not as pawns to be commanded, but as young travelers who must learn through experience. In this way, his mentorship feels more like that of a patient elder than a ruler. It is subtle, but profound, teaching through presence rather than proclamation. And this again reflects a cosmic truth. The deepest wisdom often comes not from being told what to do, but from being guided toward seeing it for ourselves. The king's interactions with Abraham Lincoln, who also holds a Martian role, add another fascinating layer to his cosmic character. Lincoln, a figure drawn from Earth's history, somehow finds himself woven into the mythos of Mars. His presence suggests that Mars is not just another planet in this story, but a bridge between mortal existence and the cosmic stage. By standing alongside figures like Lincoln, the King of Mars emphasizes how this strange universe of Adventure Time blurs the boundaries between myth, history, and imagination. It is as though the show is whispering that all stories, whether of ancient gods, earthly heroes, or cosmic rulers, are threads of the same great tapestry. The crown of Mars, too, deserves a closer look. We might think of it as a symbol of authority, but within Adventure Time, objects are never merely objects. They hold echoes of those who wore them before, and they carry forward the burdens of destiny. The king's crown glows with a celestial brilliance, but it is not his forever. It becomes a reminder that power is transient, a flame passed from one hand to another. For the king, relinquishing it is not loss, but continuity. It will serve Mars beyond him, just as he served it during his time. This crown becomes less a prize than a responsibility, a reminder that all rulers are temporary caretakers in the grand design. When the king finally departs, what lingers most is not his power nor even his wisdom, but his serenity. In a universe filled with beings who cling, cling to control, to survival, to identity. The King of Mars lets go. He accepts the closing of his chapter with dignity, showing that endings are not failures, but natural progressions. His departure resonates almost like a lullaby woven into the story, a reminder that closure can be peaceful, even beautiful. For the audience, his role feels like a gift. Adventure Time often dances on the line between silliness and sorrow, but the King of Mars brings a rare stillness to that dance. He anchors the story, reminding us that behind the bright colors and surreal adventures lies a deep meditation on mortality, power, and cosmic order. His presence teaches us that true strength is not in resisting change, but in moving with it. And so when we think of the King of Mars, we should not only see a ruler of a distant red planet. We should see him as a symbol of something much larger, the quiet, enduring truth that the universe is always shifting, always flowing, and that our role is to find peace within that flow. He shows us that destiny is not a burden, but a path, that death is not an end, but a continuation, and that wisdom lies not in holding tight, but in knowing when to release. In this way, the King of Mars becomes more than a character. He becomes a story within the story, a reminder within the dream, a voice of stillness within the cosmic noise. And when we recall his calm gaze, his gentle tone, and his willingness to let go, we are reminded of the quiet lessons that Adventure Time so often offers us. That even in a chaotic, unpredictable universe, there is harmony to be found, if only we are willing to listen. Hunson Abadeer, as we most often remember him, is the ruler of the Nightosphere, a vast, otherworldly domain filled with torment, chaos, and strange demonic order. He is feared, respected, and in many ways untouchable. But tonight, we won't begin with Hunson the Overlord, the soul-sucking demon king. Instead, we'll wander backward into the fog of possibility, imagining what Hunson Abadeer might have been before the Nightosphere claimed him, or perhaps before he claimed it. The truth is, Adventure Time leaves Hunson's past deliberately mysterious. The fragments we see are carefully chosen: his sharp wit, his hunger for power, his strained relationship with Marceline, and the terrible reach of his abilities. But what shaped this being? What path might have led him to his throne in the underworld? When we think of him, not as the fully formed demon king, but as someone, something becoming, we uncover a fascinating hidden story. Hunson Abadeer's character design gives us our first clue. He doesn't look like a mindless monster. His sharp suit, neatly styled hair, and composed demeanor suggests refinement. He carries himself more like an aristocrat than a brute. There is intelligence in his movements, calculation in his gaze. This hints at a time when Hunson was not simply a ruler of darkness, but perhaps a being moving through a more ordinary world, learning how to harness charisma and intellect long before he ever wielded cosmic power. If we allow ourselves to speculate, it is possible that Hunson's origins were not entirely different from other magical entities scattered across Ooo and beyond. Many powerful beings in Adventure Time carry ancient lineages, remnants of a pre-Mushroom War world, or even older echoes from dimensions we can barely imagine. Hunson might have once belonged to such a group, not yet a king, but a seeker. Perhaps he was a scholar of forbidden arts, a traveler between planes, or a guardian of secrets who strayed too far into ambition. The clues are faint, but they lead us toward an image of Hunson as someone who was once curious, hungry for knowledge, before that hunger grew into something insatiable. And hunger is the word that truly defines him. Unlike characters who pursue power for its own sake, Hunson's defining ability, soul-sucking, is not just an attack. It is an act of consumption. It reveals his nature as one who takes, who absorbs the essence of others to sustain himself. Powers in Adventure Time often reflect deeper truths about their bearers, so perhaps Hunson's soul-draining gift began not as cruelty, but as necessity. A survival instinct, a way of sustaining himself in a harsh reality. Over time, what was once a need may have become a desire and then a ruling obsession. This opens a door to thinking of Hunson less as a one-dimensional villain and more as a tragic figure. Imagine for a moment Hunson before the Nightosphere, a being who walked among others, perhaps even alongside humans or early magical societies, feeding discreetly to survive. He may have appeared to them as strange, unsettling, but not yet a king, not yet a tyrant. What must it have felt like to live in that in-between space, too different to belong, too powerful to remain unnoticed? The loneliness of such an existence might have carved the coldness we now see in him. When he eventually turned toward the Nightosphere, it might not have been an accident. The Nightosphere itself is a strange place, reflecting chaos, greed, and imbalance. To rule it, one must embody its qualities, but also master them. Hunson may have been drawn there because it mirrored something already stirring inside him. Or perhaps the Nightosphere called to him, recognizing him as the one who could shape it. In this way, Hunson's kingship is not only about power, but also about identity. By becoming ruler of the Nightosphere, he stepped fully into the being he was meant to be, whether for better or for worse. And yet, the mystery of Hunson Abadeer is not only in his public power, but in his private past. Because behind the shadow of the Demon King, there lingers the very human complexity of a father. His relationship with Marceline reminds us that Hunson is not just an archetypal villain, but a being who once loved, who once chose to care for someone, even if he did so imperfectly. This suggests that before the Nightosphere hardened him, before his throne demanded distance and cold authority, there was once a softer side. It may have been buried, but it was there. In tonight's exploration, we'll imagine Hunson, not simply as the monster who fears, but as a figure whose story began long before. We'll trace the shadows of a life that might have once been ordinary, explore the hunger that defined him, and reflect on how his choices, whether intentional or inevitable, led him to the Nightosphere. For in understanding Hunson Abadeer before his reign, we may find not just the roots of a villain, but the echo of a tragedy. To imagine Hunson's earlier days, we might begin with the idea of exile. Many great rulers of shadow across myth and story begin as outcasts, figures who do not fit within the societies around them. Hunson's hunger for souls would have made it nearly impossible for him to live openly among others. If he was once part of a community, he may have been forced to hide his nature, concealing his need in order to maintain ties with those he cared for. The secrecy, the quiet taking of what he required, could have created a growing gulf between him and others, every relationship tainted by what he could not reveal. And perhaps this exile was not imposed from outside, but chosen. Hunson may have realized that his power was simply too dangerous, that even with careful control he could never guarantee the safety of those around him. In this sense, he could have been both feared and self-fearing, walking away before harm could root itself too deeply. This duality, predator and protector, creates a haunting vision of Hunson's early self, a being caught between what he must do to survive and what he wishes to be. From this tension arises a more subtle question. Was Hunson always as cold and calculating as we see him later? Or was he, once upon a time, gentler, perhaps even reluctant in his hunger? Adventure Time, in its own understated way, often suggests that villains are not born fully formed, but are shaped by the paths they must walk. Hunson's detachment may not have begun as arrogance, but as defense. The less he cared, the less it hurt to be apart. If we follow this path of speculation, we can almost envision a younger Hunson as a wanderer of realms, seeking places where his hunger could be satisfied without the burden of harming those he valued. This searching could have led him through strange lands, perhaps even into the early foundations of magical dimensions. Among these journeys, he may have discovered the Nightosphere, drawn to its swirling chaos, its endless supply of lost souls, and its lack of judgment. For the first time, he would not need to hide what he was. The Nightosphere did not fear hunger, it embodied it. This sense of belonging may explain why Hunson eventually claimed the dimension as his own. To others, the Nightosphere appears horrific, a churning nightmare filled with torment. But to Hunson, it may have been home, not because it was kind or beautiful, but because it was honest. It reflected back the parts of himself he had long hidden, and in ruling it, he could stop pretending to be anything else. In a strange way, the Nightosphere may have been a place of freedom for him, a domain where he no longer had to apologize for existing. Still, there is something tragic in this arc. If Hunson once carried the possibility of being something else, a seeker, a scholar, a father who remained present, then choosing the Nightosphere was also a choice to let go of that possibility. He embraced the part of himself that could never be denied, but in doing so, he abandoned the gentler parts that might have given his life more balance. We see traces of this in his fractured bond with Marceline. His role as a father is always overshadowed by his role as ruler. In his presence, she often feels like an afterthought, a reminder of a path he could have walked, but did not. The way Hunson interacts with Marceline also sheds light on his possible past. His affection is real, but awkward, as though he has long forgotten how to express it. This suggests that before he became king of the Nightosphere, Hunson may not have been surrounded by love or family. His priorities may have always leaned towards survival, power, and secrecy. Emotional closeness might have been rare, leaving him ill-equipped to nurture the bond Marceline needed. And yet, his attempts, however clumsy, show us that beneath the layers of ambition and hunger, the spark of something more compassionate still lingers. When we piece these fragments together, Hunson begins to resemble less a villain and more a fallen archetype. He is the seeker who strayed too far, the outcast who found belonging in a place of shadows, the father who could not bridge the distance his choices created. His reign over the Nightosphere is immense, but it is also lonely. In its corridors of chaos, Hunson rules without rival, but also without true companionship. This is perhaps the greatest price of his path, not the loss of humanity, but the loss of intimacy. And so, in imagining Hunson Abadeer before the Nightosphere, we glimpse not just the making of a ruler, but the unraveling of a being who might have once been more whole. His hunger shaped him, but so too did the choices he made in answering it. Each step toward the Nightosphere may have felt inevitable, but it was also a step away from another life, a life he might have shared more fully with Marceline, or with others who could have seen him as more than a monster. To understand Hunson's path more deeply, it helps to step back and look at the wider lore of Adventure Time's universe. Many of its great beings like Orgolorg, the cosmic owl, or even the King of Mars, embody qualities tied to cosmic balance. Some are keepers of destiny, others disruptors, and some embody the inevitability of cycles. Hunson, however, seems to embody appetite. His defining trait, the consuming of souls, is not about justice or prophecy. It is about hunger, need, and desire. In myth, figures of appetite often begin as wanderers, outsiders who cannot find a place in orderly societies. Over time, their hunger isolates them, turning them into predators and eventually into rulers of their own strange domains. Hunson fits this pattern, and perhaps he always did. If we imagine him in this framework, Hunson's early existence might have been one of drifting, not tied to a kingdom or a dimension, but slipping between them, never fully belonging. Each world he touched may have sensed something unsettling in him, pushing him to move on. A lonely journey, yes, but one also filled with opportunity. In his solitude, Hunson would have had time to sharpen his wit, develop his strategies, and explore the deeper secrets of magic. We often see him as overconfident, but perhaps that confidence was earned through centuries of survival in unfriendly realms. The Nightosphere then becomes not simply a kingdom he conquered, but a reflection of who he already was becoming. Its swirling storms of chaos, its endless appetite for torment and imbalance, it mirrors the qualities Hunson carried inside himself. Perhaps the Nightosphere even chose him. In a universe filled with strange, sentient places, it is not hard to imagine the Nightosphere recognizing its ruler when it saw him. Hunson's hunger was not an anomaly there. It was the very essence of its fabric. To enter the Nightosphere was to finally step into a place that matched the rhythm of his being. This perspective casts Hunson not as a tyrant who imposed his will on a neutral land, but as a natural fit for a dimension that demanded his presence. And in this, we see the tragic symmetry of his story. The very thing that doomed him to loneliness among mortals became the key to his dominion elsewhere. Where other worlds shunned him, the Nightosphere embraced him. Yet what it gave him in belonging, it took from him in tenderness. The more he ruled as king, the more distant he became from the warmth of companionship. Marceline's existence within this story sharpens the tragedy further. She is, in many ways, the last reminder of Hunson's ties beyond the Nightosphere. Her presence is proof that he once lived differently, that he once formed a bond that was not rooted in conquest or survival, but this bond is fragile. Hunson struggles to connect with her, almost as though the skills required to be a father have long atrophied. His attempts often come across as cold or transactional, suggesting that by the time he truly embraced his role as ruler, he had already forgotten much of what it meant to care in a vulnerable way. Still, there are moments, small, fleeting ones, that reveal something beneath the surface. Hunson does not dismiss Marceline outright, nor does he ignore her existence. He acknowledges her, even tries in his way to maintain a connection. It is clumsy, awkward, and insufficient, but it is there. This shows us that the Hunson who became ruler of the Nightosphere did not entirely erase who he once was. A fragment remains, hidden under centuries of appetite and power, like an ember glowing beneath ash. If we follow this ember backward, imagining what Hunson might have been before his kingship, a picture forms of someone far more complex than a mere demon. Perhaps he was once a wanderer who sought knowledge more than power. Perhaps his hunger, in its earliest form, frightened him, driving him to find a place where it could be understood. And perhaps, in his search, he learned that the only way to find peace was to embrace it fully, even if doing so cost him the chance to live a softer life. This duality is what makes Hunson such a compelling figure. He is not only the devourer of souls, but also a man who once must have made choices that shaped who he would become. Was the Nightosphere his salvation or his prison? Did he choose it freely, or was he drawn to it because no other world would have him? These questions remain unanswered, yet they echo through his every appearance. When we step back and view him in the broader mythos, Hunson Abadeer begins to resemble archetypal figures of ancient lore. He is like Hades, who rules the underworld not with cruelty alone, but with inevitability. He is like the devourers of old myths, beings who consume not out of malice, but because it is in their nature. And he is like the tragic kings of folklore, who gain crowns at the expense of connection. These comparisons remind us that Adventure Time is not simply telling a story of a quirky demon father. It is drawing from the timeless well of myth, refracting it through the dreamlike lens of Ooo. In this way, Hunson's past becomes not just his own, but part of a larger tapestry of stories humanity has always told. Stories of hunger, exile, and kingship born from necessity. His tale may be clothed in humor and surreal animation, but at its heart lies a story as old as myth itself. Hunson's hunger for power was never truly satisfied, no matter how much he consumed. But that hunger wasn't just for food or even for souls. It was a hunger for permanence, for influence, for immortality. Perhaps that's what separates Hunson from so many of the other beings we've talked about in this video. Mo sought creation, a kind of quiet legacy through invention. The king of Mars sought to uphold cosmic balance. But Hunson, he wanted to shape the world around him through sheer force of will, not to serve, not to protect, but to dominate. And in that relentless ambition, he carved out the foundations of what would later become his throne in the Nightosphere. Some ancient scrolls whisper that Hunson wasn't always so feared. Long before he mastered his appetite, he might have walked among mortals, learning from them, testing his influence in small, subtle ways. A deal here, a bargain there, exchanging a promise for a price. At first, it may have seemed harmless, even helpful. A farmer's crops restored, a wounded warrior healed, a lost traveler given safe passage. But nothing Hunson did was free. Every gift required something in return, and with each transaction, he grew stronger, more clever, and more aware of the frailties of those around him. It was in those early days that Hunson's skill as a bargainer became legendary. Unlike the brute force of demons or the mechanical genius of inventors, Hunson worked with words. He spoke like a poet, twisting language until those who listened couldn't tell if they were agreeing to a blessing or a curse. This talent for weaving words into traps would later define him as the supreme ruler of deals, contracts, and the very fabric of obligation itself. But what shaped this cunning? What made him hunger not just for food, but for control over the desires and weaknesses of others? Perhaps the world around him was collapsing. Perhaps, like so many figures in Adventure Time, Hunson was born into chaos and simply refused to be swept away by it. To him, feeding on souls was survival, but bargaining for them? That was artistry. Now, if you imagine Hunson wandering in those years before the Nightosphere, you might see him cloaked, faceless, slipping between villages, observing humanity with an almost academic fascination. He would test their fears, their greed, their hope, and slowly he discovered something he could never find in raw power alone. He discovered the thrill of control. To have someone willingly give themselves over to him, even in small ways, was far sweeter than simply devouring them outright. This became his philosophy, Why take by force when you can be offered it on a silver platter? Of course, his growing power did not go unnoticed. Other magical entities, cosmic creatures, even minor deities began to feel the ripple of Hunson's rise. Some tried to confront him, others to ally with him. But Hunson was slippery, unpredictable, impossible to pin down. If he saw strength in a rival, he would avoid direct conflict until the advantage was his. If he saw weakness, he struck mercilessly. Over time, the balance tipped. Where once he was a nameless wanderer, he began to be whispered about as a dark inevitability, a storm gathering, one that no one could stop. Oh, it was only a matter of time before Hunson needed a place to call his own. Not just a territory to feed, but a kingdom to rule. A dominion where his word was law and his hunger could be unleashed without restraint. Some say the Nightosphere already existed in fractured form, a chaotic dimension filled with shifting horrors and uncontrolled energies. But Hunson, with his brilliance for order and contracts, bent it into something more structured, more terrifying. He took chaos and made it hierarchy, with himself at the top. And yet even in the early whispers of his reign, there are hints that Hunson's story is more complicated than simple villainy. Why? Because of what came after. Because of the daughter he would one day have and the love, yes, love, that he would struggle to show her in his own twisted way. His relationship with Marceline proves that Hunson wasn't just a flat monster, but a being with layers of conflict. Somewhere inside him, long before the throne and the titles, there may have been a spark of something more. Perhaps it was buried by ambition. Perhaps it was burned away by hunger. But it lingered, and it lingered enough to create a bond that even time, death, and dimensions could not break. So when we think of Hunson, before the Nightosphere, we should picture not just a monster sharpening his teeth in the dark, but a complicated figure, part schemer, part survivor, part father waiting to stumble into a role he never planned for. His past is foggy, his deeds shadowy, but his presence in the grand tapestry of Adventure Time reminds us that even the most frightening beings are rarely one-dimensional. They are the product of their hungers, their choices, and sometimes their regrets. And as the lanterns of the Nightosphere flicker on, as Hunson finally ascends to the throne that will define his legend, the memory of that wandering, bargaining, soul-devouring figure lingers like a ghost behind the crown. The Nightosphere. Even the name drips with unease, like a whisper that slithers through the dark corridors of your imagination. It isn't just another dimension in Adventure Time. It's a realm of chaos, of shadows, of twisted rules where the ordinary laws of existence don't quite apply. It's alive with contradictions, grotesque but fascinating, horrifying but strangely comedic, terrifying but endlessly intriguing. And at its center sits Hunson Abadeer, its ruler, its architect, and perhaps its prisoner, as much as its king. But what exactly is the Nightosphere? We've seen glimpses of it in the show, a dimension full of floating heads, endless screaming, bizarre landscapes where gravity seems optional, and creatures who don't quite make sense even when you stare at them directly. Yet beneath the cartoonish madness lies something deeper, something that feels like a reflection of every dark thought, every untamed desire, every scrap of chaos that doesn't fit in the ordered world. It's not just a realm, it's an idea, a state of being, one that could only be governed by someone like Hunson Abadeer. Hunson doesn't just sit on a throne in the Nightosphere. He embodies its laws, or rather, its lack of them. In a way, the dimension and its king are inseparable. He shaped it into a place where hunger reigns supreme, where deals define survival, where screams echo longer than laughter, yet it's also strangely functional. For all its horror, there is order in the chaos. Citizens exist. There's structure. A hierarchy flows from Hunson down through his servants, and though it's not a kind of order we would recognize as civilized, it is, in its own twisted way, stability. Imagine stepping into the Nightosphere. The air would taste like ash and copper, thick and heavy in your lungs. The ground might ripple beneath your feet, as though it were breathing. The horizon would never hold still, folding in and out like a wrinkled sheet of fabric. Faces, disembodied, distorted, grotesque, would float by, muttering secrets you'd never quite understand. And above it all, you'd hear Hunson's presence, like a low hum in the marrow of your bones, reminding you that you don't belong, and that you are very, very small. What's fascinating about the Nightosphere is that it isn't presented as pure evil. Adventure Time has a way of making even its darkest corners carry a kind of humor, an absurdity, that keeps things from being one note. The Nightosphere is filled with shrieks and torment, but it's also clumsy, ridiculous, and sometimes almost funny. This duality makes it richer. It's not hell in the traditional sense, but rather a dreamscape of nightmares where terror and absurdity shake hands and dance in the dark. Of course, Hunson's rule is what turns the Nightosphere into something greater than just random chaos. Think about it. What is chaos without a king to harness it? Hunson bends this dimension into his own reflection. His hunger for souls, his obsession with contracts and deals, his mastery over words and power, they all become baked into the Nightosphere's very nature. It's not just a place filled with screaming. It's a place where every scream has meaning, every choice carries weight, and every deal comes with a price. But it's also a place that tells us something about Hunson himself. The Nightosphere isn't simply where he rules, it's who he is. It's a manifestation of his deepest traits, his hunger, his cunning, his cruelty, and perhaps even his loneliness. In many ways, the Nightosphere is Hunson's autobiography, written not in words but in landscapes, creatures, and laws of existence that echo his soul. If Mo created BMO as a reflection of his hopes, if the King of Mars shaped his realm as a reflection of cosmic balance, then Hunson sculpted the Nightosphere as the ultimate reflection of his own darkness. And yet, for all its shadows, there's a strange kind of allure to the Nightosphere. We can't help but be curious about it. It's scary, yes, but it's also oddly compelling. Much like Hunson himself, it's more than just a villain's lair. It's a puzzle, a stage, a place where the rules are wrong, but in being wrong, they reveal truths about how fragile our own rules really are. So when we peer into the Nightosphere, we're not just looking at Hunson's dominion. We're looking into a mirror, one that shows us the raw shape of chaos when it's given a crown. One of the most striking aspects of the Nightosphere is how it operates as both prison and playground. The creatures that dwell within it scream and fight and writhe, yet none of them seem to want to leave. It is a world of suffering, but also a world where that suffering is normalized, expected, almost mundane. To the residents, the shrieking winds and endless torment are simply daily life. In this way, the Nightosphere feels like an ecosystem unto itself, self-sustaining in its chaos. Nothing ever truly improves there, and nothing truly ends. It is a loop, a cycle of hunger and torment, one that reflects Hunson's own endless appetite. Hunson's powers, too, are woven into this dimension in fascinating ways. We've seen how he devours souls, storing them like trophies, consuming them as easily as one might eat a snack. This hunger is not portrayed as an occasional indulgence. It is his very nature. The Nightosphere magnifies that hunger, turning it into an environmental constant. The very atmosphere seems to devour hope, The very ground feels eager to consume whatever touches it. Hunson's greed becomes geography. His appetite becomes air. When you understand that, the Nightosphere no longer feels like a simple, otherworldly realm. It feels like Hunson's shadow stretched wide, covering an entire dimension. Yet within this strange, nightmarish order lies something else, something almost human. When Marceline interacts with her father, we see glimpses of a more personal truth. To her, the Nightosphere isn't just a place of cosmic torment. It's her father's home. She resents it, of course, and resents him even more for how it has defined their relationship. But beneath her anger lies something important. The Nightosphere, for all its horror, is part of her heritage. It is the stage upon which her story began, the shadow she has tried her whole life to escape, and sometimes to embrace. This duality, between father and daughter, between ruler and child, makes the Nightosphere far more than just a place of screams. It becomes a stage for their fractured relationship, a physical reminder of everything unsaid between them. Think of the contrast. Marceline lives in the Land of Ooo, a place of bright colors, music, and messy friendships. Hunson lives in the Nightosphere, a place of deals, hunger, and unending torment. Yet their lives are tethered. Whenever Marceline visits her father, she is pulled back into that darkness, forced to face not just his nature, but her own. The Nightosphere serves as a backdrop for those moments, amplifying the tension between them. It is a place that says, with every screaming voice and every shifting shadow, this is who your father is, and by extension, part of who you are. What's fascinating is how the Nightosphere is portrayed visually and tonally compared to other realms in Adventure Time. The Candy Kingdom, for example, is bright and absurd, almost too cheerful, a parody of innocence. The Nightosphere is the opposite, grotesque and heavy, saturated in darkness. Yet both realms share one trait. They reflect their rulers. The Candy Kingdom reflects Princess Bubblegum's obsession with order and control, wrapped in sugary sweetness. The Nightosphere reflects Hunson's appetite and cruelty, wrapped in chaos. These realms remind us that, in Adventure Time, worlds are not just settings. They are extensions of their rulers' souls. And still, the Nightosphere is not without humor. Its grotesque visuals are often paired with absurd, almost slapstick moments. Floating heads argue, bizarre creatures trip over themselves, and Hunson himself often acts with a kind of bumbling charm despite his terrifying powers. This contrast keeps the Nightosphere from ever being one note. It's both frightening and ridiculous, a balance that mirrors Hunson himself. He is terrifying because he is hungry, powerful, and unyielding, but he is also laughable at times, petty and clumsy. A dad who doesn't quite understand his daughter's world. The Nightosphere becomes a reflection not just of his darkness, but of his flaws, his awkwardness, even his humor. When you take all of this together, you realize that the Nightosphere is less of a place and more of a story. It is a myth, a cautionary tale, a stage upon which all the darkest parts of existence can dance. It isn't simply hell nor simply chaos. It is Hunson's heart turned inside out, made into geography, air, and sky. And whenever we step into it through Adventure Time, we aren't just exploring another realm. We are walking into the deepest shadows of one of the show's most complex characters. When we linger on the Nightosphere for too long, we begin to notice how its design whispers of something older than Hunson himself. Could it be that Hunson simply inherited it, bending it to his will rather than creating it whole? The way its skies ripple, its landscapes shift, and its beings emerge half-formed suggests that this realm is ancient, perhaps as old as the multiverse itself. Hunson may rule it, but the dimension feels alive, as though it tolerates him rather than belongs entirely to him. This raises the question, is Hunson the master of the Nightosphere, or is he simply the latest in a line of rulers chosen or cursed by its nature? This idea makes the Nightosphere even more haunting. If the place itself is conscious in some way, if it feeds on chaos and magnifies the worst instincts of its ruler, then Hunson's hunger may not be entirely his own. He might be both sovereign and servant, bound to a realm that reflects his flaws while amplifying them. His greed for souls, his love of contracts, his need for dominance. What if these traits are partly the Nightosphere using him as a mouthpiece, a vessel through which it can interact with other worlds? That possibility changes our perspective. It transforms Hunson from a tyrant into something closer to a tragic figure, someone shaped and consumed by the very place he thought he controlled. This may also explain his complicated relationship with Marceline. As a father, he fails her time and again, often choosing the demands of the Nightosphere over the needs of his daughter. Yet perhaps he cannot truly separate the two. To care for her would mean denying the essence of his realm, denying what sustains him. And so he wavers. He tries in his own awkward ways to show affection. But the Nightosphere always looms larger. It is not just a backdrop to his story, it is a tether, binding him to darkness no matter how far he strays. For Marceline, this means her father is never simply Hunson. He is always half Nightosphere, always carrying that shadow with him, even when he stands in the bright lands of Ooo. The Nightosphere also functions as an echo of humanity's darkest impulses, especially when viewed alongside Ooo's post-apocalyptic history. The world we see in Adventure Time is one built after destruction, after humans tore themselves apart with war and technology. The Nightosphere then feels like the distilled essence of all that chaos, compressed into a single dimension. It mirrors the human capacity for greed, violence, and cruelty, and perhaps, in a way, it acts as a warning. Where the Candy Kingdom shows us what happens when order is taken too far, the Nightosphere shows us what happens when chaos is given free rein. Both extremes are unsustainable, both reflections of rulers who lose themselves to their natures. Yet, despite all of this, the Nightosphere is not portrayed without affection. Adventure Time, with its whimsical tone, never paints any realm or character as wholly irredeemable. Even Hunson, for all his flaws, is not without charm. He cares for Marceline in his own awkward, selfish way. He tries to connect, though he often fails. And through those small attempts, we catch glimpses of humanity in him. Likewise, the Nightosphere, for all its horror, is not portrayed without humor. Its grotesque absurdity almost invites us to laugh, to see the ridiculousness in our own fears. In this way, the Nightosphere functions like a dream. It's frightening while you're inside it, but once you wake, you realize how strange and surreal it all was. The deeper symbolism of the Nightosphere lies in its reflection of choice. Everyone who enters it is confronted with deals, bargains, and temptations. Hunson thrives on these contracts, feeding not just on souls, but on the choices people make. This mirrors the reality of darkness in our own world. Chaos does not always force itself upon us. Often we invite it in, one small compromise at a time. The Nightosphere embodies this truth. Its horrors are not random, they are consequences. Deals made, desires followed, promises broken. Each creature there seems to carry the weight of their own decisions, transformed into grotesque forms that echo their inner flaws. When Finn and Jake travel there, their experience highlights this truth. They are tempted, tricked, and forced to confront their own courage. The Nightosphere challenges them not by brute force, but by wearing down their will, asking, how much will you compromise to escape? This makes the dimension more terrifying than any monster. It is not a foe you can punch or defeat. It is a realm that tests who you are, amplifies your weaknesses, and demands you face the cost of your choices. So in the end, the Nightosphere isn't just Hunson's kingdom. It is his mirror, his trap, and his inheritance. It is chaos with a crown, a shadow with a heartbeat, a place that asks us to laugh at the grotesque while also questioning what it reveals about ourselves. And just as Marceline must reckon with it as part of her family, we too must reckon with what it represents. The part of existence where chaos reigns, where deals bind us, and where every scream is a reminder that order and meaning are fragile things. As we step back and look at the Nightosphere in its entirety, it becomes clear that it's less of a static realm and more of a living metaphor. It stands as a constant reminder of what happens when one side of existence dominates the other, when hunger overtakes compassion, when chaos overwhelms order, when shadows grow without light to balance them. This is why its imagery lingers long after the episodes end. It feels like the embodiment of imbalance, a place that swallows harmony and spits out distortion. And in this imbalance, Hunson Abadeer reigns. But the story of the Nightosphere is not just about him. It is about legacy. Hunson's daughter, Marceline, becomes the inheritor of that darkness whether she wants it or not. Every time she interacts with her father, she is forced to confront that inheritance, the part of herself that comes from him and, by extension, from the Nightosphere. She may reject it, she may rebel against it, but it remains part of her story. This is why her struggles are so resonant. She isn't just dealing with a distant, uncaring father. She's dealing with the shadow of an entire realm that he carries with him. For Marceline, the Nightosphere isn't just the place she visits. It's a part of her identity that she must learn to navigate, just as much as her music, her friendships, and her immortality. This interplay between parent and child, between realm and ruler, adds layers to Adventure Time's themes. Hunson's kingdom is not portrayed as a one-dimensional pit of suffering. It is a place of contradictions, just as he is a figure of contradictions. And through this, the show offers a gentle but powerful reflection. The darkness is rarely simple, and that the bonds of family can tether us to things far larger than ourselves. Even in dimensions filled with screams, the softer echoes of love and regret find their way through. The Nightosphere also invites us to consider how realms in Adventure Time often act as reflections of their rulers' souls. The Candy Kingdom is order made sweet. The Fire Kingdom is passion given form. The Land of the Dead is stillness and judgment. And the Nightosphere is chaos shaped by appetite. In seeing these worlds as extensions of character, the show gives us a quiet truth, that every ruler shapes the world around them, consciously or unconsciously. And perhaps every one of us carries a private Nightosphere, a place of shadows born from our flaws, mistakes, and unspoken hungers. What makes the Nightosphere so compelling, however, is that it never fully explains itself. We are given fragments, flashes of grotesque landscapes, fleeting glimpses of creatures, moments of humor amidst terror. The rest is left to our imagination. This mystery is what keeps it alive long after the episodes end. It feels infinite, like a dream you can't quite wake from. And in that infinity lies its power. If the Candy Kingdom is a bubble, contained and small, then the Nightosphere is a vast ocean of chaos, stretching beyond our comprehension. That scale, that unknowability, is what makes it feel truly cosmic. And yet for all its size and terror, the Nightosphere is not presented as undefeatable. Finn and Jake enter it and return. Marceline confronts it and continues her life above. Even Hunson himself, mighty as he is, can be pushed back, bargained with, or momentarily outwitted. This reinforces one of Adventure Time's quiet lessons, that even the greatest darkness can be faced. It may not be destroyed or erased, but it can be endured, outlasted, or negotiated with. The Nightosphere is not the end of the story. It is one chapter, one shadow, one test of resilience among many. In the end, what lingers most about the Nightosphere is not its horror, but its reflection. It asks us to see Hunson Abadeer not just as a villain, but as a man bound to his own hungers and contradictions. It asks us to see Marceline not just as a vampire queen, but as someone shaped by shadows she never chose. And it asks us to look at ourselves, to notice the ways chaos, temptation, and imbalance creep into our own lives. Just as every ruler leaves their mark on their realm, every person leaves their mark on the world around them. The Nightosphere is simply that truth, exaggerated and grotesque, wearing a crown of screams. So when we think of the Nightosphere, we are not simply remembering a cartoon dimension of horror. We are remembering a mirror, one that shows us chaos with a human face, one that reflects both the absurd and the terrifying, one that reveals that even in the darkest realms there is room for humor, for connection, and perhaps even for redemption. And as the screams fade into silence, as the landscapes shift back into memory, we are left with a simple realization. The Nightosphere, for all its shadows, is not just a place we fear. It is a place that reminds us what it means to struggle, to inherit, to laugh at the absurdity of darkness, and to keep walking forward even when the air itself feels heavy with despair. It is Hunson's world, but in a way, it is ours too. Hey there again, sleepyheads. You've followed me through the dusty halls of cosmic kings, the echoing caverns of the Nightosphere, and the haunted paths of stories whispered long after the fire has gone out. Now we find ourselves standing at a crossroads where every shadow and every light touches, where all these threads tie together into something greater than themselves. Welcome to Segment 6, the thread that connects them all. Adventure Time, as strange and whimsical as it might seem on the surface, has always been more than candy people and quests for sandwiches. Beneath the laughter, beneath the bright skies and the bubbling music, is a quiet heartbeat. A story that has never stopped weaving, even when the characters didn't see it. And if you close your eyes, if you let your thoughts slow down with me, you might start to see that pattern flickering just below the surface. Think of Finn, the last human, born into a world that had long moved past humanity's reign. His story has always been one of searching for identity, for meaning, for love, for home. From his very first adventures, he was pulled toward mysteries that seemed far bigger than him. Encounters with cosmic beings, meetings with figures from lost ages, echoes of wars he never fought, yet still carried the consequences of. And at the same time, he never stopped being a kid, trying to do the right thing, a kid who wanted to hold on to kindness, even when the world offered cruelty. Then there's Simon Petrikov, the Ice King, a man who once had everything, a brilliant mind, a deep love, a promise of a life filled with discovery. All of that undone by a crown whose whispers turned his brilliance into madness. His tragedy is not just about what he lost, but what he became. A reminder that power, even when taken for survival, always leaves a cost. And yet, at the core of his story, there is love. a love so deep for Betty that it rippled across dimensions and timelines, refusing to let go. Marceline, too, carries her own echoes of that same thread. The half-demon child of Hunson Abadeer, trapped between two worlds, never fully belonging to either. Her immortality left her with centuries of grief, of watching friends fade, of shouldering loneliness while hiding behind songs and laughter. And yet, despite her sharp edges, her story is one of connection. Her bond with Simon, forged in the rubble of the Mushroom War, became one of the most tender and heartbreaking threads of the entire tapestry. And Hunson Abadeer, well, even he is not separate from this design. The ruler of the Nightosphere, a figure painted in shadows and greed, still carries the tether of parenthood, of being part of Marceline's foundation. His darkness is a counterweight to her light, and without him, her story wouldn't carry the same gravity. Even the King of Mars, sitting on his cosmic throne, plays a role in this interconnected dance. His presence is a reminder that the world of Ooo isn't just about one land, or one group of people, or even one timeline. It's a reminder that everything is connected to something greater, that the choices of one human boy can ripple all the way up to the stars, and the whispers of a cursed crown can change not just a life, but an entire future. If you step back and look at these stories not as separate pieces, but as threads in one fabric, you begin to see something beautiful. Each character, no matter how strange, tragic, or whimsical, is grappling with the same question. How do we hold on to love, to connection, to hope in a world that seems designed to strip it away? It's the same question we all wrestle with, isn't it? In the quiet hours of the night, when the day's noise has gone silent, our thoughts wander. We remember the people we've lost, the choices we regret, the dreams we still chase. We wonder what connects us to others, what stories we are a part of that we cannot yet see. Adventure Time answers not with a clear solution, but with a kind of comfort. It tells us that even in a world of ruined kingdoms and strange magic, the thread of love remains unbroken. That family, whether by blood or by bond, keeps us anchored. That even cosmic beings and demon kings are not free from the pull of connection. So, as we drift deeper into this final stretch of our journey tonight, let's follow that thread together, and let's see how it winds between Finn, Simon, Marceline, Hunson, and even the King of Mars, tying their stories together in ways both grand and intimate. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find that their struggles mirror our own more closely than we ever thought possible. When you look at Finn's journey, you can see how the thread of connection pulls him again and again toward figures who carry deep scars of their own. His friendship with Marceline isn't just about two adventurers having fun. It's about a human boy offering her something she had long thought impossible. Simple, unconditional companionship. He never saw her as a monster, never feared her fangs or her lineage. To Finn, she was just Marcy, the cool vampire who loved music and knew how to make the darkness feel a little less lonely. That kind of acceptance is a thread, binding them in ways that neither of them fully understood at first. Simon's thread intertwines with theirs as well. When the audience sees those flashbacks of him with a young Marceline, sheltering her, comforting her, we realize that love can outlast sanity. Even as the crown gnawed away at his mind, even as the Ice King persona erased his memories, some part of Simon held on to that bond. And Marceline, in her music and her grief, carried him too. Every song she strummed on her bass guitar seemed to whisper his name, even when she didn't mean to. That's what threads do. They tug at us, even when we're not paying attention. Then there's Betty. Her story may seem separate at first, but the more you watch, the more you see she is essential to the tapestry. Her unwavering devotion to Simon, her reckless leap into magic to save him, her eventual transformation into Gob's vessel. Each step of her journey is proof of the same theme. Connection, even when it brings suffering, is what defines us. Without love, without someone to fight for, even the most brilliant lives risk crumbling into despair. Betty's sacrifice was not just about saving Simon. It was about preserving the thread of love that had defined both of their lives. Hunson Abadeer, though so often painted as a villain, also reveals this truth. His relationship with Marceline is strained, awkward, and sometimes outright destructive. Yet there are glimpses, fleeting, rare, where his role as a father shines through. He may not show love the way she needs it, but the connection between them is undeniable. He is the shadow against which she defines herself, the dark that makes her light visible. Their bond may be jagged and painful, but it is a thread nonetheless. And perhaps it's because of that difficult tether that Marceline is able to appreciate genuine connections when she finds them elsewhere. Even the King of Mars, seated on his throne with the calm wisdom of the cosmos, embodies this same idea. His role isn't about meddling in the lives of mortals, but about showing them that their choices ripple out far beyond their sight. When he interacts with Finn, it's as though the universe itself is acknowledging the boy's place in the web. Finn isn't just one hero in one land. He's a vital knot in the grand design. The King of Mars reminds us that the thread is not confined to Earth or to Ooo. It stretches to the stars, to places beyond comprehension, and yet remains deeply personal. All of these connections, the tender, the tragic, the difficult, the cosmic, are not separate strands but parts of a greater weave. Finn holding Marceline's hand, Simon comforting her in the ruins, Betty leaping into danger for love, Hunson stumbling through parenthood, the King of Mars gazing at the web of fate. All of these moments point toward the same truth. The world may be chaotic, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel, but the bonds we form with others keep us from unraveling completely. And in that way, the show is whispering something to us. That even in your life, where days blur together and nights feel heavy, there are threads tying you to others. Family, friends, strangers who leave ripples on your heart. Each one is part of your fabric. You might not always see the pattern clearly, but it's there, being stitched with every laugh, every goodbye, every moment of kindness or grief. Adventure Time doesn't just tell stories of magic and mayhem. It holds up a mirror and says, "Look, your story is not so different. You too are part of a tapestry that stretches farther than you can imagine." The thread that runs through Finn, Simon, Marceline, Hunson, and the King of Mars runs through you as well. Think of how often threads in a tapestry are hidden beneath others. You might not notice them at first glance, but without them, the whole picture would fall apart. In Adventure Time, so many of the great beings we've explored are like those unseen threads. Mo, the King of Mars, Hunson Abadeer. They're not always at the center of the frame, not always present in every adventure. But their existence makes the rest of the story possible. Mo gave life to BMO, a little machine who would one day become Finn and Jake's dearest friend. Without Mo's quiet choice to pour love into a robot, Finn might have missed the comfort of BMO's gentle songs, the way they tucked him in when Jake wasn't around, or the way they reminded him that he was never truly alone. That single thread stretched from Mo's workshop to the treehouse shaped the boy's life in subtle but profound ways. The King of Mars, watching from his cosmic throne, did the same for Finn in a different way. He gave him perspective, reminding him that life is not just about the present, but about the echoes our choices create across time. His thread was less about companionship and more about wisdom. Yet the two kinds of threads work together, one binding the heart, the other guiding the spirit. Hunson Abadeer's thread is more difficult to love, yet no less important. By being absent, careless, and even frightening, he forced Marceline to discover her own strength. His shadow gave her the contrast she needed to shine brighter, and though their relationship was fractured, it still tethered her to the world. If he had been completely absent, perhaps she would have drifted away entirely, lost to centuries of loneliness. Instead, his presence, however flawed, reminded her that she was still someone's daughter. Even the harshest bonds are still bonds, and sometimes they're the ones that teach us how to build better ones in the future. When we stand back and look at this tapestry, we see how each of these beings, whether in shadow or in light, plays a role in sustaining the world's fragile balance. Mo nurtures creation, Hunson reigns over destruction. The King of Mars maintains cosmic order. They are opposites and complements, all threads woven into the same cloth. And if you squint, you can almost imagine that the cloth they create isn't just the world of Ooo, but a quiet reflection of our own world, too. There's also something dreamlike in how these threads interact with Finn himself. He, the last human boy, becomes the point where these vast forces converge. It's as though the tapestry is being stitched around him, knotting cosmic rulers, ancient makers, and dark fathers into the story of his growth. Adventure Time shows us that destiny isn't about one person standing alone. It's about one person being the center of many connections. Finn's courage and kindness are his gift back to the web, strengthening the threads so they can hold together even through chaos. And isn't that such a soothing thought? That none of us are truly carrying the weight of life alone. Just like Finn, just like Marceline, just like Simon, we are part of a weave so much greater than ourselves. Sometimes we're the bright threads, adding color and light. Other times we're the dark ones, heavy with sorrow or mistakes. Yet both are needed. Both have meaning. Both keep the pattern intact. Even the moments of silence in the show, those quiet pauses where nothing seems to happen, are a kind of thread. They give us room to breathe, to see the pattern more clearly. Mo in his solitude, Hunson in his kingdom of shadows, the King of Mars gazing at the stars. They remind us that even when we feel most isolated, we are still tied to something larger. Loneliness can feel endless, but threads are always there, invisible, until someone pulls at them. And the beauty of a bedtime story like this is that it lets us imagine those invisible connections. Maybe you're lying in bed right now, thinking of a friend far away, or remembering a family member you miss. In that quiet thought, a thread shimmers. You can't see it, you can't hold it, but you know it's there. Adventure Time, in its gentle, peculiar way, reassures us of that truth again and again. The great beings we've barely come to know, Mo Hunson, the King of Mars, are not just characters in a cartoon. They are mirrors of those hidden figures in our lives who shaped us without always being visible. The teacher who believed in you, the parent who tried and failed, the stranger whose kindness still lingers. They are all part of your tapestry, the same way Mo and Hunson and the King are part of Finn's. So when we gather these threads together, what we see is not a story of isolation, but of interconnection. Not a tale of lonely gods and wandering mortals, but of a shared fabric that holds the universe together. And in that recognition, perhaps we can rest a little easier, knowing we too are stitched into something vast, mysterious, and beautiful. There's a quiet poetry in the way Adventure Time shows us that no single thread can ever tell the whole story. Mo's life was one of stillness and silence, hidden away from the noisy world. Hunson's was one of chaos and shadows, ruling with a fearsome hand. The King of Mars sat somewhere above it all, his gaze stretching out across eternity. At first, these lives seemed so different, so unconnected. Yet when you look closer, you realize that their threads cross again and again through the people they touched, the choices they made, and the echoes they left behind. Finn, standing at the center of Oo's tangled history, shows us how those threads matter. The love he received from BMO traces directly back to Mo's act of creation. The wisdom he received from the King of Mars lingers in his choices, reminding him of the weight and beauty of mortality. The love and pain Marceline carries from her father ripple into Finn's journey too, shaping their friendship and strengthening his understanding of what it means to care for others despite flaws. Finn becomes the weaver without even realizing it, stitching these influences together into a life defined by bravery, kindness, and hope. And isn't that what life so often feels like? We walk through days that seem ordinary, yet somewhere in the background, there are threads pulling us forward, memories of people who cared for us, lessons passed down, mistakes made and forgiven, moments of connection that quietly shape who we are. Adventure Time just paints those truths with brighter colors, sharper contrasts, and stranger landscapes. The truth at the heart of these stories is simple, yet endlessly comforting. No one is ever just one thread. You are not only your mistakes, not only your joys, not only the relationships that hurt you, nor the ones that lifted you up. You are all of them at once, woven into something stronger than you can see from up close. And every person you meet, no matter how briefly, becomes part of your tapestry too. That's why the great beings of Ooo, though they remain mysterious, never truly vanish. They linger in the weave. Mo lives on in BMO's gentle laugh, in their love for lullabies and quiet games. Hunson Abadeer lingers in Marceline's fire, in the songs she sings to chase away the dark, in her stubborn resilience. The King of Mars lives on in every moment Finn pauses to reflect, in every time he chooses wisdom over impulse, in every gentle word he speaks to comfort a friend. These beings may be distant and strange, but their threads are still warm, still alive, still holding the fabric of Ooo together. And as we reflect on them, perhaps we realize that the same is true for us. Those who shaped us may seem far away now, through time, through loss, through distance, but the threads remain. They hum softly beneath our days, connecting us in ways we rarely stop to notice. So as we close this gentle journey through the beings we barely know, let yourself imagine the great tapestry that surrounds you. Picture the countless threads that stretch out from you, some bright, some dark, some thin, some heavy, and how they weave into those around you. Even if you feel alone, even if you can't see the pattern, trust that it is there. Trust that you are not separate from the fabric, but an essential part of it. And maybe, just maybe, as you drift into sleep tonight, you'll feel the comfort of those threads wrapping softly around you. Not as chains, but as warmth. Not as burdens, but as proof that you belong to something larger. A story that is still unfolding, a weave that is still being stitched, a fabric that is endlessly beautiful in its complexity. Because in the end, that's what Adventure Time whispers to us. That no matter how strange or lonely the world feels, we are all threads in the same cloth, connected, enduring, and quietly shining together. Good night.